In this lesson, we are going to start working with auto layout. We are going to start super simple and work our way up from there. All right, so let's leave our login screen alone for now, and we're going to drag in a new view controller. So go ahead and open up your object library, and we can drag in a view controller and just plop it right there. Alrighty, so this is where we're going to be doing some testing and learning here in this first lesson. And you'll notice that our initial view controller that was here when we started up our project has this arrow right here. And that is indicating that this is going to be the first view loaded when we launch the app. But we can change that. If we click over here and select our view controller, if we look at its attributes inspector, here under view controller, we can set this one to be the initial view controller by checking it. And then you'll see that the starting arrow went over to this view controller and is no longer on this view controller. All right, now let's add in a little view here. All right, so I'm going to open our object library again, search for UI view, and you want this view right here. It represents a rectangular region in which it draws and receives events. So just going to drag that right in. And to make it easier to see, let's change the background to that same blue color. Just going to resize it a little bit and yeah, put it right there in the middle. All right, that looks good. All right, so now I want you to think about this. All right, so suppose you were blindfolded and put in front of a big pad of paper and given a pencil and told to draw a square in a specific location. What information would you need to know to do that? Now let's say that you have a partner that is not blindfolded. She devises a plan whereby she can tell you what you need to know. She tells you to put your hand out and follow the edge of the paper and go up until you find the top left corner. Now from there, your partner can tell you to go a certain distance to the right and then a certain distance down. That point will be the top left corner of the square. Now your partner can tell you to draw a line to the right, a certain distance, down to the left, and back to the origin of the square. So basically what you needed was an X and Y location for the origin of the square and a width and height. Those are the four main things that you need to fix in 2D space, pretty much anything. All right, so keep that in mind as we start our first example. So we have our blue UI view here. Now, when we talk about adding constraints to our elements, we are usually going to mean one of two things: pinning and aligning. In this first example, we are going to use the first, pinning. Okay, so what we want to accomplish is to have this blue view fill up the view, but have a specific amount of margin or padding on all four sides. So you can think of pinning kind of like if you put a nail into the four sides of the rectangle here, and no matter how the view stretches or changes size, the rectangle will maintain the same distance from the edges it has been pinned to. Because right now, if we change our view type, it does not keep the same distance from the edges for any of these other devices. Okay, so we want it to stretch out and keep the same margin or padding no matter what the canvas size is. So we are going to use our auto layout tools down here. The one we're going to start with is right here. It looks kind of like a TIE fighter. It says add new constraints. And if we click on it, then, first you have to have a view selected. So I'm going to select our view and then click on it. And you'll see up here, we have a little square here, and this is representative of our view, okay? Or a UI button or a label or whatever it is that you have selected. And then up here we have these four red lines, okay? And these numbers, they represent the spacing to the nearest neighbor, okay? So in this case, our nearest neighbor on the left of our view is the super view, okay? So we're saying pin this 20 to the left of our super view, pin it 20 from the top of our super view, 20 from the right, and 20 from the bottom. And then once you have added all of those, we can say add for constraints. And you can see it it's stretched out and is now having the correct amount of space on all 4 sides. Now, we said that to know where to place an object in 2D space, you need an X and Y position for the origin and a width and height. So by pinning it to all 4 sides, we aren't explicitly assigning a width and height or an origin, but that can be inferred by the system, because with a margin of 20 on the top and left, that makes an origin of x equals 20, y equals 20. And with a margin of 20 on the right and bottom, the width and height can be inferred from the width and height of the view minus the margin of the top and left, respectively. So we can say that this rectangle is fully constrained. And you will notice here these 4 blue lines on each of the sides. That is a visual indicator that this view is fully constrained. So what happens if we don't provide one of the 4 required constraints? Well, let's see. So with the view selected, I'm going to open up our size inspector. And in addition to being able to set the position and the width and height here, what we have also are the constraints, okay? And so we have 4 constraints here, the right trailing edge, leading edge, bottom, and top, okay? And we can edit any of these, so I can change this to say 60, and you'll see that jump further in. I'm going to change that back to 20. And then we can also delete these. So just clicking on one, selecting it, and pressing delete. All right, so now you see that we no longer have that blue line, and now we have some red lines, all right? So that's not good. And you'll see over here on our view controller scene that we have this red arrow. If you click on it, then it'll take us and give us a little bit of information on our missing constraints. It says here that the view needs constraints for width, because without that constraint that was pinning it to the right, a specific spacing, we have no way of inferring the width of this view. And if we click here, we have this little red button here. If I click, then it will say add missing constraints for view. So Xcode is kindly offering to add enough constraints to resolve the ambiguity. Now, sometimes Xcode nails it, sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it gets it completely wrong, all right? But so you can give it a try. I'm gonna give it a try here. I'm gonna say add missing constraints. And what it did was it added an align center x2, okay? So it centered it. And that works. I mean, if we select one of these other device sizes, then, I mean, it works. But it's not, I don't think it's the most intuitive solution. So I'm gonna delete that align center to X, and I'm gonna add back our trailing spacing. So I'm gonna open back up our pinning tool here, and I'm going to reselect our trailing edge spacing of 20 and say add 1 constraint. And now everything is back to being blue lines, and we are fully constrained. All right, so now we can check out any of these device sizes and everything looks good. We can change our orientation, and no matter what you do, this view is going to maintain the desired shape, all right? So that is how we can pin things to nearest neighbors, to spacing. We're gonna be working more with this, and we're gonna get a little bit more complex. So I hope you're excited for that, and I will see you in the next one.